to be recorded. It's starting right now. And we will be sharing that recording by the end of this week, maybe early next week. It'll take a little bit to get that converted via YouTube, and the link will be available for 30 days. After that, we'll have to take it down just for copyright and protections. So we just ask that you are respectful and not share that link with anybody who is not registered for the conference, but you will have access to that. The chat from the conference will also be saved. It automatically gets saved, and we intend to share that as well. If there's questions or any insights that do come up in the chat, you'll be able to go back and see those. Linda's going to be sharing her slide presentation with us. You'll notice when she shows us her slide presentation, she's got wonderful, beautiful pictures of a lot of students in those slides. So we ask, and she asks that we just respect the confidentiality of those students and not download any slides that have student images or personal information, but you're welcome to download or share other slides that do not contain that. And you can take screenshots if that's helpful on your computer. We will be sending out a certificate of attendance with the evaluation form. It will be linked to the evaluation form once the conference is over. If you attended Tuesday, you will get one for that day, and you will get a separate one for today. And then finally, Linda will be has graciously made herself available to stay on a little bit after the conference is over to answer any questions that you might have. You also feel free to put any questions into the chat. Somebody will be monitoring that chat during today's conference. I think that about covers the have-tos that I have to say. So I'm so happy to again introduce to you Linda Rief. Linda comes to us from Durham, New Hampshire. And she has recently, and I'm going to say it again, but reluctantly, just left the classroom after 40 years of teaching language arts to 8th graders. Can you see her saint wings? Because she's got them. Linda has been a national and international speaker for many years on the subject of adolescent literacy. She is the author and co-author of numerous professional books, her most recent being the Quick Write Handbook, 100 Mentor Texts to Jumpstart Your Students' Thinking and Writing. I personally have been using Linda's 100 Quick Writes, fast and effective exercises that build students' confidence, develop their fluency, and bring out the writer in every student for many years with both students and adult learners, and I highly recommend it. Linda is also the co-founder and former co-editor of Voices in the Middle, a journal for middle school teachers published by the NCTE. And she's an instructor at the University of New Hampshire's Summer Literacy Institute. A couple of neat things that I learned about Linda that I want to share is that for 3 years, she was the chair of the Early Adolescence English Language Arts Standards Committee of the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards. And in 1988, she was the recipient of not one, but 2 Kennedy Center fellowships for teachers of the arts. And she actually spent a whole month at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. I'm so envious, writing prose and poetry based on the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, and had the opportunity to read her writing at a performance at the Kennedy Center, which was also broadcast on NPR. She's a little bit of a celebrity here. In 2000, Linda was the recipient of the NCTE's Edwin A. Hoey Award for Outstanding Middle School Educator in English Language Arts. And her classroom was also featured in a series produced by Maryland Public Television called Making Meaning in Literature. That year, she was also the recipient of New Hampshire's English Language Arts Teacher of the Year. So please join me in welcoming Linda Rief to Vermont and to our Vermont Council on Reading Spring Conference. Welcome, Linda.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you so much for all of that. And thank you to everybody for coming back. So I'm going to have to talk through sharing the screen, and I'm going to jump right in, I think, once I get the screen shared. Someone recommended, I think it was Kevin, that you also have to press optimize for video clip. Is that correct?
If there's video, optimize for video and audio and smooth it out on the viewing end, yeah.
Yeah, is that little
It's usually in the lower left-hand corner. There's like 2 check boxes. I just checked them
Yes,
both.
I checked the one, but so now I've checked both of them. Thank you, Kevin. Okay, I think that's right. And are we there? We are there. I'm always excited that something actually works when I don't have 8th graders to help me. So today, what I really wanted to share with you were multimodal approaches for communication. I happen to love this particular quote. The world tells you to hurry, art tells you to take your time. And so many of the examples I want to share with you today, they do take time in the classroom, but what I notice, it really gets the kids to think deeply about those things that they care about. So art may take time, drawing may take time, but I think it gets kids to places that they can't go just putting words on paper, and leads them to more words. So I just wanted to remind folks, I won't spend an awful lot of time on this, but that I do frame the year in choices, so that even though I'm going to share a lot of drawing and artwork and visual representations and videos today, the kids still have choices about what they're doing. I'm offering these as possibilities. I'm teaching them how they may do some of these things, but I always want them to know that if this is not working for them and they made a good faith effort, I want them to go with whatever does work for them. So I just want to start out by something as simple as one of the things at the beginning of the year that I asked the kids to do is, what's some trait or some way or some stance that you think you want to focus on this year? And I made a huge quilt. I had a great wall outside my classroom that was about 4 by 8 feet as they came in the door. And the kids designed this one, what's the one trait? I want to be kinder to people, or I need to be braver, or I need to find a way to be more confident in myself. And I wanted them to see those every time they stepped into the classroom. So that was just one of the things I asked them to do. This was mine, where if I'm asking kids to do something, I think it's got to be good enough for us to do, as well as asking the kids to do it. So mine became part of that quilt along with them, that I thought I really have to find joy. Sometimes I get really down and negative on some of the things that happen in schools. And I thought, I just want to focus on joy. What brings me that joy in the classroom? And so our art teacher, believe it or not, looked at all these words that were on the wall, and she said, what if, I kind of had an idea, what if when I get these kids for art during the second or third quarter, if we take those words and we build this huge representation. And she did shadow pictures of the kids. This is approximately 6 to 7 feet high and about 8 feet long. And she had the kids cover these replicas, these shadow figures, in the words that they wanted to focus on. So I just love the fact that other teachers are noticing some things that you do and saying, what if? How can I make this mine and make this important for the kids in another discipline just as well? Or when we were doing the quick writes the other day, I wanted to really make it clear it's not just quick writes that we're doing all the time. There are other ways that I'm trying to get the kids to think about who they are and what has been important to them. So one of the other ways is doing a positive negative lifeline. And one of the things I would like you to notice about that, we started adding world events to it. What world events have contributed to something positive or something negative in your life? And when I sit down next to kids to talk to them about their writing, particularly the kids that are kind of reluctant writers, I'll say to them, you said the divorce of your parents was one of the worst things that ever happened. And then I noticed you said it was one of the best things that ever happened. Tell me more about that. So whatever that is, a world event or a personal event, if the kids are willing to talk about it, this has been incredibly helpful for going to personal narrative also, and also opinion writing. Some of the topics they ended up writing about came from their positive negative chart. Or some years I do a likes and dislikes chart. I, by the way, I never did all of these things with the kids in one year because it takes too much time. But even having a likes or dislikes, that again, it gives me something to talk to the kids about. Tell me about music, tell me about soccer, tell me more about what was it like having those braces put on, when are you going to have them taken off, and cigarette smoke. One of the kids ended up, it said just cigarette smoke, and wrote an incredible letter to his grandmother about asking her how much is it possible for you to consider stop smoking and how much damage it's doing to you. So there are all different ways they use these particular charts that we do. I also, actually, I have to say, I think we've done this every single year. Um, we're using Georgia Hurd's heart maps that she talks about in Awakening the Heart. And so these were two of the kids, Arthur and Josh, who happen to have the same last names, but they're not related, or Mia's. And many of the pieces of writing that these kids did came from their heart maps. So there are always ways that I'm trying to figure out, how can I get the kids immersed in drawing? Because when you sit down and draw, you start thinking about things you hadn't thought about before. And although it takes time, it does lead them into some possibilities for the writing. I had read an excerpt from The Absolutely True Diary of Part-Time Indian. And if you notice in that, he does a drawing of what it feels like to him to be Indian on one side and to trying to be white on the other side when he is sent to that all white school. And so this again was a possibility for the kids. What does it feel like for you to be torn in half? Kitiara, who was from Iceland, did just an incredible job thinking about how the pressure on her to speak Icelandic, but also to learn English. And then Josh did a similar thing, the pressure on him to be the perfect student, when what he wants to do is he wants to play soccer, he wants to really enjoy his friends, but his family really, really pushes him that you don't need to do any of those things until you get the academics where it's the best you can be. So it was these, you start to see the pressures that kids are under when they're doing things like this. Or we read Ralph Fletcher's, we read an excerpt from it, from Marshfield Dreams. And Ralph has a drawing of the playground where he grew up in Massachusetts, in Marshfield. And so I started drawing the place that I grew up. I did not grow up in that huge house. My parents were actually caretakers, living in that tiny little house down below it. And we started, as we were drawing, I said to the kids, just put a word next to something that dawns on you that happened at that particular spot. And so we did some sketches of places we'd lived. We also did, if you look on the right-hand side, I had read a couple of excerpts from George Ella Lyon's Many-Storied House. And in that house, she's got different poetry about all the various rooms. And we did that also. So in my notebook, I started drawing the house where I spent most of my growing up in Hingham, Mass. And if you can see in the alternate ink color, as I was filling it in, I started remembering things that happened in those particular rooms. So I'm going to ask you to stop for 2 or 3 minutes. And I want you to think of a place that was really meaningful to you. It could be a grandparent's house. It could be the house that you grew up in. It could be a school that you are in or that you went to. And I'm just going to give you 2 or 3 minutes to sketch one of the floor plans of that place and to fill in with a second color ink some of the just words that get you back to some of the happenings or feelings in that particular place. Okay, so for just 2 or 3 minutes. Remember, it doesn't have to be beautiful. It's just a rough sketch of squares, and just put a couple of words in there when you start to remember some things that happened or some feeling that came from that particular place. All right, so I'm going to ask you to pause. I know you're not done, but um, it is one way that you can get into the writing. The other thing that I want to mention here is I have never hesitated to write about those things that seem to be tough and hard. I have never, ever in 40 years of teaching had a kid laugh at me. And so if you notice at the bottom of this, I'd never written about it before, but until I sketched the den, I hadn't remembered the day that dad fell backwards through the den window. And so I ended up writing, he fell backwards, staggered, dipped left, then right, and fell backwards, glass shattered, catching the sunlight like a kaleidoscope as shards split and flew in every direction. It was summer, tax season was over, and dad was drinking. I never dared invite friends over. I never knew if he'd be passed out on the couch, covered with plastic. Now I know why. I didn't know what to do when I saw him tangled in bushes, all blood and torn branches, him wondering how he got there. So I know I'm going to go back to that. I know I'm going to write a scene from that. And I am perfectly willing and have shared it with the kids. So when we're writing about things that really matter to us, they write about things that really matter to them. But I wouldn't have gotten to that if it hadn't been that I actually drew some um, just designs of the house, or I do an awful lot with art postcards. So I've collected probably several hundred now. Everywhere I go, different museums, I grab a couple. And particularly when we're doing fiction writing, this is a great way to dive into fiction writing. I actually say to the kids after they've done the drawing, and they do a spectacular job of it. What drew you to the postcard that you chose, and what were you thinking as you drew it? So it almost always leads them to some kind of writing. I will couple that with Something Permanent by Cynthia Rylant and Walker Evans. I also use the Harris Burdick pictures, looking at those pictures and the one phrase that's on the back of them, where can that take you? What do you take from that? But sometimes it's in the drawing that slows us down and helps us get to things that we weren't thinking until we started actually doing the drawing. This is another one that I learned from Penny Kittle. And I've done this year after year after year. I'm going to ask you to do the same thing. Just put your hand down on the page and trace it. So I'm going to give you 1 minute to, actually 30 seconds to do that. Put your hand down on the blank page and trace it. And what Penny has asked is, what have you held or touched or experienced with your hands? I was a little bit nervous at first using this with 8th graders, but it worked out fine. And so then what I'm going to ask you to do the same thing I did. Think about 5 possible stories that might be connected to your hands in some way. If you look at my ring finger, all I jotted down was my grandmother's rings when I went to visit her in a nursing home. Her rings were stuck to her finger from dried food. And that's all I need to remember to get back to everything I was thinking. When I put just a little couple of dash facts down on my middle finger, I had been reading Romeo and Juliet to the kids, and something happened that one of the kids, I just looked really quickly over at him and I said, "Did you just give me the finger?" And that's all I need to get back to what happened. Or my husband, your index finger, he and I were splitting wood a couple of years ago. And unfortunately, he had on Velcroed gloves. The Velcro caught in the wood splitter and it took the glove and a third of his finger off. So that whole story of taking him to the emergency room, he did lose a third of his finger in that. And then when I did the design of the house, just a quick sketch of the house, I remembered that on the back porch when I was 6 years old, I tried to convince my 4-year-old sister that I could cut out her tonsils and she would be able to eat ice cream for the next 2 to 3 weeks. So I'm just writing down sister tonsils and I can get back to the whole story. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes on 5 fingers. Is there any story that comes to mind that has anything to do with any of your fingers or hands? So
Just a
just 2
question,
minutes.
Linda, before we start this, I think that, is there any way you could move the video bar on your screen over? Because it's coming up as ours is like a black bar in the middle. We can't see the whole screen. Is there a way to drag? I think
That's weird. I have no idea how,
because it seems like a lot of us can't see the whole screen. I don't know if that's going to work, but.
I have never heard that before. I don't know if that's, is that on my end?
Does anyone know? Ooh, there you go. It's fixed.
Well, that's, okay. You are seeing the whole screen with that?
Yeah, I think it's probably not in presentation mode anymore, but oh wait, now.
Yeah, it's not, but this is clearer for all of you.
Yes.
Or Kevin, yes, no?
Yeah, it looks good now. Thank you.
All right, so shall I just leave it like that? I'll leave it like that if that works for everybody. Anybody else want to let me know if that works or doesn't work? Thank you, Eileen.
Sure.
Rebecca, is that working?
Yes, it is working. Sorry, I was it is working, and I can see your whole slide. We see your whole screen, but that's okay. We can see your slide.
All right, that's fine. Well, as long as that's more helpful to people, we'll just leave it like that.
Okay.
So as you're, well, we've probably taken the 2 to 3 minutes we need. Sarah Kay, who does spoken word, if you've ever listened to her on YouTube reading her delivering her piece, Hands, it's terrific. And Ralph Fletcher also has a wonderful piece that I use with the kids called Don Murray's Hands. But Sarah Kay's spoken word is a terrific piece also to use with them. But just any way that you can get kids to really think about their lives, but in unique ways of coming to know them. So even just drawing your hand. I also use this when I go to conferences. I draw my hand and I go, if I can take 5 significant points from this all day session, it will have been a valuable session. And so I just use that as something to shape what I'm doing. All right, now how are we gonna, let's see, we're gonna have to try to get to, yeah, this will work. Is that still visible to everybody like that? If this is a lot of information, but if you want to take a screenshot on this, I think what happens every single time I start presenting information about drawing and visual text, I'll get a teacher who will ask me, what do I say to my principal when they say, why are you letting 8th graders draw? And so part of that is part of the research that I'm giving them from Peggy Albers, Finding the Artist Within, and also Elliot Eisner did incredible amounts of research into the arts and what the arts do, that they teach students to see, notice, and critically interrogate the words or engage the cognitive. Also, the arts require that learners pay attention to the relationships that exist with any text. So those are just a few reasons that I think it's really important to use them. So if you want to take a screenshot, just so you can find some of the research that's been developed around using the arts in classrooms, please do that. So I also use drawing. This young man, Adam, he kept telling me in his notebook every single time when I sat down next to him and looked at blank pages, he would say, I can't write, I can't write, I hate writing, I hate writing, I hate writing. And I said, well, how much do you hate it? And he said, I would rather be playing soccer than writing. And other things like, I'd rather be eating pizza than writing. And finally, Scott, who was across the table from us, he without even looking up, he said, dude, that is not bad enough. And so, and Adam looked at me and he said, what do you mean that you think it's not bad enough? Do you think it's not bad enough? I said, it's got to be something really bad for us to totally agree with you that you hate writing. So he did. I'd rather swim in shark-infested waters than write. I'd rather be locked in a cage with 47 lions and a slab of meat tied to my back than write. I'd rather be hit in the head by a wrecking ball than write. I'd rather be sat on by a sumo wrestler than write. I'd rather wrestle a grizzly bear or get poked in the head by woodpeckers than write, but I did. So when we were talking the other day about kids who struggle with writing, are they struggling with writing, or is it just they don't think they have anything to say? And so I think we have to find ways of letting them have that voice. So we made a poster out of this and actually put it in the room. He started just writing short pieces, but I said, you know what, if you want to do a lot of the drawing, he did a lot of cartooning, a lot of drawing. When Don Murray came to visit us in the classroom, he wrote, every note that he took from Don was a drawing of Don that we sent to him as a thank you note. So think about the places where your kids really have strengths. Adam now happens to be a videographer in Toronto. He has done a lot with drawing. So I just think we need to value that. He's certainly getting his message across. Or I had Molly, who, you can't quite see this on the page left-hand page of her notebook, she had this drawing of he. And when you unfolded it, you could see he and she. And if it's big enough for you to see, he looked into my eyes, he whispered, he sounded like the angelic trumpets she thought most heard in heaven. He spoke like a philosopher. So she's drawing this picture using these words, and then she writes in response to it. I'm so glad I don't write stuff like this. Otherwise, I might end up a romance novelist writing about heaving bosoms and such. I must have been really bored today, writing almost 3 whole pages. It just goes to show you, you can write lots of things, tons of drafts, and never come up with anything you like. How do you find your niche? How do you choose your path? What do you do when you want to be something, like a child prodigy or a fantastic writer? But whenever you try, it comes out all beige and mushy and bad, or too dramatic and too childish. Sorry, that was a major run on. How do you sound dull when you just can't? How do you sound adult when you just can't wait? I hate being 13. I hate being not quite an adult, but not a child either. They should have a test to determine your maturity. Like if you get a low score, you have to go back to 3rd grade. And if you get a high score, you go straight to grad school. I hope I don't get lost in life. I mean, that's a pretty incredible thing for a kid to be thinking about, even in her notebook. But that's what I want the notebook to be. What are the big things that matter to you? Or I had said to Rachel one day after I had gone to one of the concerts that they had, man, I sure wish I could play the piano. And she said, well, I'll teach you. Well, she tried to teach me without a piano. And she had 4 pages in her notebook the next week when I collected it, where she had sketched out everything she thought I should know about how to play the piano. Or Thomas, who I just wanted you to see a couple of pages from his notebook where he had been drawing in response to Charles Zimmick's poetry, and what he says that you can't read, but I just wanted you to see the layout he had on the page, that Simick's poetry made him think about those ways that we treat each other. And that first drawing that he's done is 2 child laborers working in a factory who look out onto what's happening, and they've looked out onto a bombed building. Well, what's the factory that they're working on? It's a factory making bombs. And he said, sometimes we don't think about the repercussions of what we've been asked to do. So some of the responses in their notebooks gets pretty sophisticated, or also gets pretty funny. I had a picture book illustrator, Roger Esley, come in to talk to the kids about the difference between drawing as thinking and drawing as performance. And what he was talking about, you saw the cartoon from Adam, is drawing as performance. He's trying to draw the best. If we go back to that, that's drawing as performance. He's trying to draw the best cartoons characters he can. This is drawing as thinking. I'm going to draw out with just stick figures and keywords what my thinking is. So this was Sarah's. We asked the kids to go home and ask their family for the silliest, stupidest, scariest, or most dangerous thing they'd ever done. And Sarah came back with a story, which she storyboarded. You can see all through the left-hand side of this. Their dog ate 10 $10 bills. And her father insisted that the 4 kids had to find the money. I mean, she started telling this story, and every kid in the classroom went, oh my God, that is so gross. You didn't do it, did you? Of course we did. My father made us. So she tells this story in her storyboard. And when the kids start asking questions, this is where she realizes she has to revise the story. She has to add to it. Why would the dog eat these $10 bills? Because, and if you look down here, She ate tissue, she ate homework, she ate trash, she ate food. And then also what happened? Well, she's going to show us that for all 4 kids, each one of them, this one walks the dog, no luck, thank God. Whoa, that one didn't, nothing to clean up there. Thank God. And then, oh no, the 4th kid had to find it. And she goes on to tell this incredible story about how they actually cleaned it up, dried it off, and took it to the bank to deposit it. So there is a difference between drawing as thinking and drawing as performance. But here's one more that is drawing as thinking and performance. This was, Jack came back with a story his dad told him. And I want you to notice the pictures, the faces of the 2 kids. This is his dad and his dad's best friend in high school in New Hampshire. They heard the chemistry professor explaining to them how volatile hydrogen was. And they also knew there was a weather balloon that was in the chemistry lab. And the 2 of them decided that they would like to take it to Portsmouth, New Hampshire at midnight one night into the field that's, if any of you have been to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and behind the school that's there, there's a huge, massive field where they set off fireworks. But he and his dad, they took this hydrogen tank, they filled the air balloon, and one of them lit it on fire. There was a huge boom and explosion over Portsmouth. Wow, that was so cool. You think anybody saw it? Nah. The next day in the Portsmouth Herald was the huge headline, UFO sighting. Over 100 claim bright burning object crosses the sky. So they're perfectly comfortable telling a funny story like this in cartoons. And we know that they don't have to write this out. What I love, the minute you look at the faces of his dad and his dad's best friend, you know that he thinks this is probably the stupidest thing that they ever did. So it's even in the drawing like this that we can see the feeling that they're trying to get across. And what I also started doing was asking the kids at least once every 2 weeks, pick the one word that you've collected in your vocabulary list that's in your notebook and draw it so we can understand what that word really means. And we're going to start putting up a word wall of just some of these great words. So the minute you see this visual image defining arduous, it becomes so much clearer to kids as to what that word means. But I also always ask them to put it in the sentence in which they found it instead of writing their own, and to cite the source that they got it from. But again, they're seeing this over and over again. So what I continue to do, if you look back, this was drawing as thinking, and I had the idea that what if in some of the complicated texts that we're reading, such as Romeo and Juliet, that I use drawing as thinking to help them do a character analysis. And so I set up what in the beginning is your character like in the beginning of the story? What are the choices as the play progresses? And what is the result of the choices? So I just want you to sketch it as drawing as thinking, stick figure keyword, but from the text, how do you know that? And so if you look at Fred's drawing, he chose to follow Friar Lawrence. I mean, one of the things I would also say about this, when we're sharing movies with kids or we're sharing books with them, novels with them, we somehow think they can hold on to every single character that's in the movie or every single character in the book, and they can't any more than we can. If they can take something from one character that they want to follow, and really think deeply about the choices, particularly in Romeo and Juliet that Friar Lawrence made, they're going to understand the choices of the other characters also. So this is one of the ways that I started having kids do any kind of analysis of the character, and they could really give me an essay, they could give me a piece of poetry, but this is their way of understanding what were the choices that this character made that he could have done very differently. So Actually, I'll just, if you've got questions, put them in the chat box and we'll go back to these. So I also worked for years on a team that I absolutely loved. We met every single day, social studies, science, and math. And what we always talked about is, what are we doing in our own classes that we might be able to build on in other classes? And Nate, who was the social studies teacher, he said, tell me more about this cartooning. He said, because I've got kids who don't seem to understand some of the concepts I'm trying to get across in some of the historical events. And so we talked about, how can you offer or encourage kids to show you through cartoons and just quick little scripts, dash facts about what they understood. And so one of them that he did do was the French and Indian War. And then we went back as a team and we looked at what his kids had done. And he said, you know, quite frankly, I am shocked and surprised to see how much these kids were able to show me they knew. I couldn't figure it out in their writing because they couldn't seem to find the words to get it across. But once they had the opportunity to show through drawing and through just some significant words, they were much more able to get that across. Yep. Rebecca, you have to unmute.
Sorry, I was saying goodbye to a colleague. It wasn't you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
That's okay.
I thought you were raising your hand. Bye-bye. So also what I just want to mention, when I ask kids to try specific genres of writing, we read a number of mentor texts. So even though we've been doing all this cartooning, we're looking at cartoons and specific characteristics specific to that genre. So one of the ways I want to show you just very quickly in other genres how we do that, but then I want to show you at length through persuasive writing how I did that with them. So just so you can see everything that we did on Tuesday, in addition to the quick writes we were doing, we would be reading 5 to 7 personal essays. I think somebody asked me at the beginning of today about 14 months on the home front, which was written by a sophomore in high school. And it's one of the pieces that I use with the kids every year since I had read it. Because it's just got a lot of characteristics and traits that I really would like them to know. So we read the 5 to 7 personal essays. Some are professional, some are from my kids. And we talk about in small groups, they're at tables where they're sitting beside each other, 4 to 5 at a table. And then we summarize what each class has come up with. And this is the chart that I put up on a huge Post-it note. So this stays up in the classroom the entire year. What did the kids notice? Now, I love Ruth Cullum and Vicki Spandell, who did the 6 traits and then 7 traits and 8 traits. But quite honestly, when you put those up on the classroom wall with no discussion with kids, they have no idea what you're talking about. But if they've developed this, if they've developed the traits of that kind of writing, they know now these are the things that I'm trying to look for in my own writing that shows this is a personal narrative, personal essay, or memoir. And that became one of the things we looked at. What's the difference between a personal essay and a memoir? And most of it is in the reflection that you can add to that. Here's what I noticed this meant. So if you've got questions about this, put those in the chat box too. So I want to show you a second one. And this would be flash fiction, which I decided a couple of years ago, I could not read another 20, 25, 30 page short story because I have never written one myself. And I don't think many kids are capable of writing them. But they are very capable of developing using some of the traits of fiction in shorter pieces. And then I heard Nancy Atwell talk about using flash fiction. I started gathering a bunch of collections together and started sharing this with kids because flash fiction is only 350 to 700 words. And it's just got some characteristics to it that the kids love, that it jumps right into the action. And there's always this turn, 180-degree turn at the very end. If we had time, I would love to show you some of the flash fiction the kids wrote, because they really understood. There has to be something that takes a huge turn, and every single word I use has to contribute to the overall feeling I'm trying to get across. So again, I'm putting on the whiteboard what the kids notice. I'm then putting it up after I've had the 4 classes, the conclusions that we can draw, and this stays up. So the kids, while I'm teaching some flash fiction, they might try it and say, no, you know what? I got an essay I want to go back to. And that's perfectly okay with me. So the third one that I want to show you is the persuasive writing and an argument. Same thing, we read 3 to 5 pieces, but these are longer. So normally what I do is make a packet for the kids and let them read them on their own. So I'm sitting there reading with them, even though I've read these before. I want to sit there and do exactly what they're doing and have them talk as a small table. What did you notice in these persuasive pieces? And all right, what do you think we should draw some conclusions about that? So this drives what I'm going to show you next. So we've gone through all of this to see some examples of persuasive writing. And as we're doing persuasive writing, these are the expectations that I have for them. A piece of writing that is in response to a belief or a strong opinion that they hold. And I'm going to show you how we actually came to that. Research, they have to research from 3 articles. One of them has to be a New York Times article. Plus, I want them to find a human interest story and an infographic, because many of the things kids read today happen to be infographics. And I want them to be able to read those scales as part of that. But I also want them to do a political cartoon, try it, because how could you portray what your strong belief is? So again, I'm giving them political cartoons. We're talking about the characteristics of it. And when they're done with these 2, they have to do a process paper telling me what they did, how they did it, how well they did it, and what they might do differently the next time. Because that process to me is as important as the product. And then I've been asking them the last 5 or 6, 7 years to do a mixed media video where they're using their essay as the focus. Now, what I want to say about this is I know nothing about technology. And I had to say to the kids, I know nothing. And they said, we know. Don't ever touch the computer when you're trying to change something, because I always touch the wrong thing. They know it, and they can use the technology they have. I can help them with the content, but I can't help them with the technology. When we did these videos, I had 100% participation because they're so adept. So I want to show you the process and then show you some of the videos they did. This, again, I don't want to read this to you, but if you want to take just a snapshot of it, please do that. If anybody wants me to send it to them, I probably can. It's probably easier if you take a snapshot of it. And this is how we start. I just wanted you to be aware of this. If you go, even if you have kids who say, I have nothing I feel strongly about, if you go to the New York Times Learning Network site, they list more than 100 issues that have been interesting to teens, and they update it constantly. So you can even give them that list. Is there anything on this list? The other way I start it is usually I'll think about what are 2 or 3 of the things that people are arguing over in our town or school district. One of them was 2 or 3 years ago that a football team, we don't have a football team. And there was a strong contingent of kids and parents who believed that strongly that we needed a football team. And so that became one of the issues. I said to them, who thinks we should have a football team? Who thinks we shouldn't? And they talked out what their opinions were. So that started us. But then what I'm asking kids to do, once they come up with an issue they care strongly about, they put it on a huge piece of paper. I shouldn't say huge, it's more 11 by 17. I have them lay it out on the table at which they sit. And then every kid in the room has to go table to table to table. It takes us 45 minutes. And they write a question, something they want answered to whatever the issue is. Um, and these kids then use this as the basis for how they're going to conduct their research. What are the questions that they're trying to answer? Okay, so that's the beginning of this. And then I'm asking them to actually look at an infographic or to look at a human interest story. And in their notebooks, it's where they're writing down what do they notice, what are they learning, what are they thinking from these documents before they actually start doing the research into the topic. I just want them to have other ways into the thinking on this topic. And so this would be a piece that Gianna wrote. And one of the things that we discovered, I'm just going to read the beginning of this to you. One of the things we discovered in the 5 to 7 pieces that they read as mentor texts, that very often, if there was a personal story embedded or in the lead, it attracted a reader because they could see a human being in it before they dove into actually what their opinion was about this. So hers is about what can we do about gun violence? I hear the shatter of glass. The sharp sound pierces through my head. Everyone is scrambling around trying to get as far away from the door as possible. Crouching behind a desk in the back corner, my heart is pounding. Silence. Everyone is still. Uh-oh, what is that? Remind me later. Whoa, where'd we go? I got back to that all on my own. So she starts with, she has made up this story as if they are hearing footsteps. I listen carefully, each step getting deeper and deeper. Hearing a knock, I whip my head toward the door. The doorknob turns slowly. She's setting up the tension before she dives into her opinion. On average, there has been one school shooting every week so far in 2018. So one of the things they noticed was embedding in their particular piece something that had human interest to it. So I also wanted you to see she is citing all their sources. These kids are still doing all the research that's expected of them. She has written in her notebook what she notices as a human interest story. And human interest simply means there are human beings in the actual picture they find or in this infographic. So this comes from her notebook, but she's woven it into the actual essay that she writes. And when we're doing political cartoons, I'm doing the exact same thing that I would with any genre of writing. We're looking at 3 to 4, 5, 6 political cartoons, and we're thinking about what are the traits that we noticed? What's the issue? What's the cartoonist's opinion? What are they using? And what the kids noticed was they were using symbols, exaggeration, labels, analogy, and irony. So when they're constructing their own political cartoons, they're effective if they're including everything or close to everything that they can that's here. So we're putting up as examples. These were the political cartoons that the kids did along with the essays that they wrote. These were 2 of them where they understood this was Eleanor's. She also had written an essay about requiring guns for teachers in school, saying that is not a good idea. So why is this here? Became what we're having to carry this load of a gun now. Or one of the other kids had done how expensive it was to go to prom because her older sister was having to pay for it. And if you notice all the price tags she's got here, she said, you know what I discovered? You can take 2 trips. You can have 2 people have round trip tickets to Paris for the same amount that it costs to go to the prom. So she's trying to show through the political cartoon, what did I discover? And this is what I want to reiterate. just again and again, we do not have to know the technology. The students know it and they teach it to each other all the time. So a lot of this multimodal way of communicating is through storyboards, book trailers, personal narratives, poetry. It could be theirs or others. I mean, so many of these that I don't have time in the 2 hours that we have to show you, but I want to show you some of them. It can be reflections. It could be a digital tour of their notebook or their portfolio. But it's through these videos that they're showing me what they learned. So one of them that I want to show you is Abby's. And she had been studying, she was fascinated when the science teacher said something about helium and how we're losing so much of it. And so why does that matter? And she started out with a story. A long, thin strip of beach stretches in front of the runner, an endless plain. The sky is beautiful. The quiet gold of dawn sheds light on the water. The runner's footsteps fall like a steady metronome. Her heart pounding, she stares out at the ocean only to stop, squinting. She realizes they are helium balloons floating on the water. And now she dives into actually the point of what she wants to say. Every year, 100,000 marine animals die from marine debris, mostly from balloons. So she constructs an essay. Some of the kids, when they did their video, used the essay word for word. Others did a script and a storyboard and did not use the actual essay, even though they used the information from it. So this is all the works that she cited, all of the information that she gathered. But one of the things that I want you to do when you see Abby's video, I want you to think about hyperbole. And in the chat box, as you're watching this or right after we finish watching it, where do you see that she's using hyperbole to get across her argument? Now, I'm hoping this.
Linda, before you show that video, I just wanted to bring up a question from the chat, if that's okay.
Okay, sure.
So this was from Kim, who's asked, when you show the colored pictures in the students' notebooks, for example, the infographics, do you provide them? Do you cut that out and prep those so that they are ready for the students?
No, they have to find them. I've shown them infographics that I have so that they know what an infographic is, but I can't possibly do that because I've got 100 kids all doing 100 different issues. So they have to find the infographic for sure. Yeah. Yep.
Thank you, Linda.
Okay. Is this large enough for people to see? I hope so. Okay, I'm taking that as a yes.
Helium. Okay, let's start with the basics. Helium is an element with 2 protons in the nucleus. It is most well known in its gaseous state, which is used in balloons. Helium is the second most abundant element in the universe, but humans have used up almost all of it on Earth. Helium is a non-renewable source, so what's on Earth is all we have.
Is this loud enough?
And why is this such a big deal, you ask? Well, helium is used for more than just balloons. In fact, helium is the thing that cools the magnets in MRIs. Without it, they wouldn't even work. Now let's talk about helium balloons. When a child lets go of a balloon, the wind blows it to the ocean. Throughout the journey, the balloon slowly leaks helium into the atmosphere, where it escapes Earth forever. The balloon then pops, exploding into thousands of pieces and dropping into the ocean water. Turtles and fish then eat these pieces and die. Every year, 100,000 marine animals die from marine debris, most of which are balloons. Still not convinced? Helium also has health concerns. Ever sucked air from a helium balloon to make your voice high and squeaky? Well, if you don't get air in time, death is almost certain. So, let's recap. No helium equals no MRIs. Helium balloons equals dead animals, and sucking helium equals dead you.
did you notice? Where does she use hyperbole? So what the kids noticed, which because I can't see the chat when I've got it set up like
Right.
this.
So
Um,
Marley responded that the last part with the equals is the only response so far.
Okay. So what the kids noticed though, they said if you suck helium, you're going to die.
Mm.
And every kid in the room looked at each other. And I mean, I've sucked helium and I didn't die. So we had a great conversation about hyperbole, that she is exaggerating this. The other place she's exaggerating, many animals definitely die from marine debris, but it's not basically from balloons. It is definitely from balloons, but not the percentage that she had. So we had a good discussion about what when you're presenting something like this and looking at advertisements, how much hyperbole is used in an advertisement to get you to buy something or to do something. Um, the other thing that I hope that you notice is that she sped up quite a bit of what she was showing because it was very slow. And when she started doing that, all of a sudden I looked up and there were 5 or 6 kids around her table saying, "How'd you do that?" And so she showed them. And constantly they were showing each other, "How'd you do that?" So this next one that I want you to see, I had asked the kids, you don't have to do a persuasive piece as a video, but I would like you to do a piece that you choose. It could be the best piece of writing that you've done this year. It could be show me what you've learned, just something you've learned from the writing or reading that we've done. And so one of them that the kids did, Blake did just a beautiful piece about a personal narrative about our grandmother. And then Thomas did this one.
What is it like to be you? This is me. Focused, driven, suave, loyal, silly, friendly, athletic, perfectionist, Asian, yet have a French last name and a pair of white parents, and I don't fit into any stereotypical molds. Stringing a lacrosse stick is just like my life. Complicated. A lacrosse head can be compared to the framework of a piece of writing. Both, when alone, are solely a frame, but once filled, they both form truly magnificent things. The shooter strings add emotion, the sidewalls add detail, the head acts as the framework of the writing, the bottom string is the conclusion, and the mesh is the theme. The sidewall. It latches the mesh onto the head and forms the pocket. The sidewall does all the work from behind the scenes. Each individual knot adds and complexifies the way the pocket takes shapes and performs in many small ways that most people will miss. Sidewall knots are the little details of a piece of writing. They do the small things that add depth, and in the case of lacrosse sticks, literally. Every knot must be precisely aligned, drawn unbearingly tight, and have unequivocal placement, and essentially, be perfect. The pocket. It holds the ball, draws the most attention from the stick, and takes all the glory, but sometimes beauty can be hidden. The pocket is the theme of the writing, what a reader takes from the writing, and what they will remember. But the theme of the writing isn't always easy to find, and some pockets can look ugly, but can function as well as an oiled machine. Shooter strings. They add feel and a touch of personality to your stick, so it can truly be yours. Shooter strings are like implementing your emotion into a piece of writing, your own personal twist to a piece, your own flair. And as Robert Frost once said, no tears in the writer, no tears in the reader. No surprise in the writer, no surprise in the reader. The bottom string. It alters the depth of the pocket, for better or for worse. It is the last part and it anchors the pocket down to the head. The bottom string is the conclusion. It brings the piece of writing to a close. They both close out and are a vital piece to the pie. With it fitted just the right way, it will finish off a pocket or a piece of writing on a high note. I don't fit into any stereotypical molds. I have a white pair of parents, a French last name, and yet I'm Asian. Perfectionist, athletic, friendly, silly, Loyal, suave, driven, focused. This is me, and stringing a lacrosse pocket is just like my life. Complicated.
So I love the fact that he was able to sit what he knows about lacrosse side by side with the writing that he does. That I would never have given directions to do that other than leaving it wide open. Just show me something you've learned about writing this year. Or it could be this next one. I think it starts the minute I press on it, where this really was Henry's conjecture about something that he believed would be valuable for us. And he argued it really well. And then he wrote a separate script for actually doing his video. Oops, sorry.
A terrifying ordeal, a car crash. Over 37,000 people in the United States alone die every year as a result of a motor accident, and it is predicted that taking your eyes off the road doubles your chances of getting into a crash. It is reported that 570,000 accidents are caused each year by distracted drivers. These types of accidents claim over 2,600 lives each year. Behold the manual transmission. Some people worship the manual transmission, and some people are completely unaware of its existence. This model is not currently equipped with a manual transmission, but my other car is. That car is not here right now. Only about 7% of new cars in the United States are sold each year with a manual transmission. A lot of people choose manuals over automatics for enjoyment reasons, but I think we should be choosing them over automatics for a different reason: safety. Not just for the safety of the driver, but for the safety of everybody. So what is a manual transmission? In a car with a manual, you must shift the gears of the car yourself. You do this by depressing the furthest left pedal, called the clutch, and moving a lever or stick located in the center console, hence the name stick shift. Most cars have 5 forward gears, but some have as few as 3, and some have as many as 7. The area in the middle is for neutral, where no gears are engaged. First gear is for the lowest speeds, and the highest gear is for high speeds. Manuals are often cheaper as well. This is because they're less complicated, so it's less difficult to fix the transmission if it's broken, and to manufacture it in the first place. They also get better fuel economy usually, and this is because there are torque converters in automatic transmissions that, without going into too much detail, they cause power loss and for more fuel to be required to be burned. Most cars today are sold with an automatic transmission. What that means is that the car shifts the gear. You don't shift the gear. So how that works is there are 4 modes: park, reverse, neutral, and drive, that are on this stick in the center console. You only have 2 pedals, one for gas and one for brake. The one for brake stops the car and one for gas starts the car, obviously. Now, not having to pay as much attention and being able to just drive and not have to worry about shifting your gears sounds great, doesn't it? Well, you're wrong. That means that you can take your attention off the road much more easily and be distracted by something like a cell phone, or even something like an alcoholic drink, which you should never, absolutely never do. So my solution for this is drive a manual. Manuals will force you to pay attention by always paying attention to the road, your revs, and having you shift the gear so that you don't have an extra hand to drink or use your cell phone with. I think that a manual can be a great solution. So basically, if you don't pay attention while you're driving, you'll be saying hello from the hospital.
So one of the things I want you to know from this, he showed me the first draft. And I said, well, you talk a lot about standard shift, but you haven't said anything about or shown us what a standard shift is. And he said, you think I need to show that? And I said, well, if you're trying to convince people that this is what they should be driving and it would keep them from being distracted, you probably need to explain what a standard shift is. So I know nothing about technology. I don't know how he wove video with stills, with voiceovers. I know none of that, but I know enough to be able to look at the video and say, this information is missing, and I think you might need to read that to include that. Or I can say, you know, the music that you have doesn't quite fit with what's the feeling that you're trying to get across? So what music should you have to do that? So I want to show you one last one because I want to give you some references. This is Lucas, and he did a piece. His parents actually took Lucas and his two brothers out of school for an entire year. I mean, we worry today about kids losing something. I think they probably gained quite a bit at home, but they took them across the United States for an entire year. He wrote a piece called The Wonders of Wandering. These are his sources that he cited. He actually, now you can't see this completely, but if you look back at this after you get the video, he taught us what needs to go into a video. So he showed the kids, this is what I think about. I think about the image and the narration. And then he did a storyboard, The Wonders of Wandering, so that we could see, does he want to do a close-up shot, a medium shot, or a distant shot? And then this was the video that he crafted. And I do want to say, well, I'm going to have you watch this first. And what I would like you, which I think you can't see, write down what you notice Lucas uses or does to convince you of his stance. Just one thing that you notice.
Nowadays, we have instant access to information about what's happening halfway around the world. We can see tanks rolling down the streets of Ukraine, marvel at Olympians in Sochi, and watch celebrities glide down the red carpet in Hollywood from flickering screens in our living room. The world seems small, but as Mark Twain observed, broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's lifetime. The best lessons in life come from wandering off the paved paths to explore. I've spent over 8 months wandering across America in my family's minivan. Along the way, I picked cotton with a farmer in Virginia, protected my fry bread from a pack of hungry dogs on an Indian reservation in New Mexico, and rode a stubborn horse named Prince with a rodeo stuntman in Wyoming. Interacting with mustachioed cowboys and sun-weathered mountain climbers along the way helped me learn so much more about other cultures than I'd ever have learned sitting at home. According to a recent study, benefits of travel start not long after you leave home. In fact, after only a day or so of travel, 90% of people have significant drops in stress levels, according to Chris Erskine of the LA Times. In addition, researchers have proven that experiencing new cultures actually opens up our minds. By seeing cultural differences, travelers are more willing to realize that there are different and equally valid ways of interpreting the world, says author Jonah Laird. Stepping outside of one's familiar bubble can be confusing, but it can also make us more creative. Wandering out of our comfort zone to explore doesn't just get us suntan and souvenirs. It helps us gain a new perspective, engage with new people, and makes us more adaptable. Trying a bowl of gumbo in Louisiana, huckleberry pie in Montana, or fried okra in Virginia isn't just fun. It makes your mind more aware of the present moment. Scientists have found that such unique experiences open our minds to different ways of thinking. As Jonah Laird explains, a bit of distance helps loosen the chains of cognition, making it easier to see something new in the old. When we immerse ourselves fully in unfamiliar surroundings, we're more likely to have wonderful aha moments. It's the journey that matters, not the destination. Whether you end up wandering through swaying stalks of corn, peering up at sequoias scraping the sky, or dodging spiky saguaro cacti, you'll realize that the best way to fully understand life is by exploring. Let yourself wander a bit, because not all who wander are lost.
You know, what I wanted to add to this, Lucas, after watching this, he said it was perfectly okay if I showed it. He said, but please make sure you tell people it's one of my first drafts and I know everything that I could be doing differently to make it better. But it certainly is worth looking at. The essay that he wrote actually is in one of these books. I would highly recommend these. I used, this is from the New York Times Learning Network, and his essay is one of the 100 that are in here. It was pretty exciting for him to have his essay published for 24 hours on the New York Times site, and that's part of the conference. One of the things I've asked Rebecca if she could put on the chat for you, I found an article from the New York Times that lists many publishing sites for teenagers that I'll give to you. It was a terrific article. It was only a couple of years ago, but we'll put it on the chat for you. So I want you to think about what Malcolm Gladwell says too. Good writing does not succeed or fail on the strength of its ability to persuade. It succeeds or fails on the strength of its ability to engage you, to make you think, to give you a glimpse into someone else's head. And I think that's what I'm trying constantly to do with kids, to get other people to think. This you cannot see, but I just wanted you to be aware that these were the kinds of things that we were looking for in the video when we looked at what the kids had done. And this is the kind of thing they have to, I mean, they're doing voiceovers, they're doing music. This is an incredibly sophisticated process that they have to use. They know the technology, but it's a matter of putting it together so that an audience is really made to think differently. So always we're looking at all the different possibilities of how they might do that. So if there are questions that you have about the videos, just drop those in the chat box and I'd be happy to get those to you. But I wanted to just end with and show you before we end, because I would like to go to some questions that any of you have, that I also let the kids, instead of writing an essay about what you've learned, or what you're thinking about yourself so far this year, tell me what you've taken from this. So this year, I've learned to make the reader see the story, not just read it. I've learned to ask questions, find the big ideas, write down vocabulary. Myself as a writer, quick writes are not my strong point. I need time to think, and that's really important information for me to know. I set my expectations for story plots and my writing very high. I have a hard time thinking of ideas. In other words, I overthink. I have trouble finding craft moves in the book I read. I write better and faster when I know where the story is going and when I like the topic. So she's showing not just herself, but showing me what could I be doing differently to make this succeed, this writing and reading succeed for her. Or this one that Ben wrote, big ideas, main themes and ideas that help you should understand the world, are like bumper stickers. Craft moves, how does the writer write to affect the reader? What have I learned? I mean, I'm sorry, this is Henry. Loves to use poetic devices, uses good description. Again, who is he? And what have you learned? I love this when he says punctuation, 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 directions to the reader, symbols act like musical cues. That's what he took from it. And so they're showing me, this is what I've learned so far. Or this particular one, I won't read to you, what I've learned about writing, what I've learned about myself, is really valuable information, but it lets them think and deliver this information in different ways. All of these, this one, Allison's mindset reset. I can't write, I don't understand, I won't even try. I'm just bad at LA. I only like to draw. I can't do this. I guess I have to read this. Maybe I actually get this. I want to write down my thoughts now. Wow, I can't put this down. I understand so much more than just the words. Wow, my grades are getting better. I write outside of school now. Also, I can combine my love for drawing and literature. I can do this. So, what's that mindset reset that she has? And always, this, when they're doing major pieces of writing, I'm asking the kids to do a process paper, which tell me how this piece of writing came to be. Where'd you get the idea? What kind of problems did you encounter? How did you solve them? All of these are in the book Read, Write, Teach. But I do have to give the kids a grade, and I end up with a grade on process, which is good faith participation. They have to hand in all the drafts that went into a piece. This is probably the easiest way for me to read it because I've already heard the draft several times. And the content, all those large Post-it notes that you saw, personal narrative, flash fiction, persuasive writing, that's the content. Were the kids successful in getting that across? And conventions, absolutely. If you're going to go to an audience, you have to polish it to make it the best that you can. So I'm probably going to skip through a fair amount here. Although I want you to see what they said at the very beginning. That one, I'm going to skip a few here. I love this, that this was Lucas's end of year assessment. I began the school year tolerating LA writing and reading, but ended the year actually looking forward to watching my writing develop. I like that I could write some stories and not take them to final draft. I think that's important that we give kids choices in that way too. You have to have a finished draft of something, but you made a good faith effort at a police, sorry, talking way too much. At flash fiction, it's not working for you. If you've got a personal narrative, another one that you want to do, that's perfectly fine, but you made a good faith attempt at it. You understand what goes into it. I don't want to have to grade you on something that you don't feel good about. So they do have that choice. This one, again, I'm asking them, what are some books that you read that you felt really strongly about? He read Origin, The Cellist of Sarajevo. I mean, these are books that are highly sophisticated, but because I'd even mentioned them, the kid said, I want to try that. And looking at the kinds of things that they take from them always amazes me. It's not everything they could take from it, but it's usually something. And I'm just going to skip through some of these. I showed this to you yesterday that I think is a good way of having kids show us at the end of the year what they were able to do as readers. This was Zoe's collection of all the books that she read by putting them on one sheet. I think collecting passages helps the kids become astute at writing things that really they start to understand what makes beautiful language or gives you strong feelings. And so they're collecting these as kind of mentor texts for how you go about writing something, how you share a character, how you make us feel something for a character. But what she had to say toward the very end, I'm sorry, when I've got it this way, it's really hard to see. She did more writing than she ever expected. She had to reduce the piece that she had written. She had to take out 700 words in order to meet the requirements for the New York Times contest, which she did. She writes a lot more with a lot more frequency, and she chose much more challenging books than she said she had ever read or used before. So I am going to skip through some of these others because we can't quite get to it. But I do want to mention Penny Kittle, who is a good friend of mine, teaches at Plymouth State one semester, and she has usually 1 to 2 classes in the fall. But one of the things that she started asking her kids to do this year, because they were remote, was to give her a tour of their notebooks. So if you're even if you're not remote anymore, I think instead of having to read the kids' entire notebook, it's having them go through and maybe every quarter pull out the 3 to 5 pages that they think are their strongest thinking, and to give you a tour of that notebook. And it could be digitally, or it could actually be live. So if I went through my notebook and gave a tour of the notebook, I would have chosen, these would have been 5 of my latest entries, that the last ones that I had for the last year that I was teaching. This is what I would have shared and shown why I felt good about those entries, and others not so much. So again, I talked about this yesterday, that I think kids can do their best work when they're given time and they're given choices. Response that actually is given in a way that they can expect that response to be similar to this most of the time. This is what you did well. These are the questions you might consider answering. I mean, I even used this same model. What if you tried this, when we were looking at the videos and I was talking to them about the videos, what they could do differently. This worked really well. These are the questions that I'm wondering that you might consider answering. And what if the music becomes a little scarier? Do you think that might get the scarier feeling across? And models, always finding it could be professional models and also models that you feel kids have constructed in the past that you think are really worth sharing with kids. And strategies like quick writes or craft moves, and a fair amount of drawing, and keeping some kind of notebook where they can collect all of this. Because I certainly knew very quickly, working with 8th graders, do not give them separate sheets of paper, because you will never see those sheets of paper again. They get left on the desk, they get thrown in their locker. Everything gets put in their notebook so they can go back and look at it and know that we value that. So I'm gonna kind of stop there with about 15 minutes to go. And just maybe we can have a little bit of conversation if folks want to open it up to what are some things you learned today that you might try in the classroom. Don't worry about jotting it in the chat unless you would like to, but what are some things, can we open it up, Rebecca?
Yeah, sure. I do want to ask a question that's in the chat and make sure that we shared in the chat what you were asking us to. So Natalie and Ellen both shared the link to the New York Times student contest.
Okay, great.
Kim is asking a question. Do you have the students keep their own notebook, or do the notebooks stay in the room?
The notebooks go home with them because they have to do some writing at night. But there were always anywhere from 3 to 5 kids that I knew the notebook was never going to come back. And so that notebook stayed in the room. They knew I had a folder for every one of the 4 groups, a crate for each one. And they would just drop their notebook in it, or they would drop it on the table in front of it, and I would put it in it, and they would know it's there. Because, I mean, why assure failure if you know the kids are never going to come back with the notebook and they have to have it? So yeah, some of them left them there.
I don't see.
And I only counted what they did in them during the class. That was a given with some of them.
I don't see any other questions in the chat. So if folks just want to unmute, you can go ahead and ask Linda your questions if you have any now.
And maybe I will stop sharing. Shall I do that?
That would be helpful. Yeah. Thanks, Linda.
I have a question, if that's all right.
Of course.
I've gone back and forth a bit with just thinking about different learning needs and trying to find tailoring and trying to find the right. I also work with 4th graders right now. That's some context, but trying to find the right graphic organizer for the right situation, and flirt with the idea of should the graphic organizers be consistent from project to project, or is it okay for them to flex? And it seems like a lot of this, but then also providing a lot of opportunity for student-directed organizers when we're working on a larger project. I'm just curious how that all comes into play with some of maybe like a longer unit or something like that. I don't know if that question is very clear.
Well, I'm not sure I can answer that, Kevin. I have never used graphic organizers. I mean, I've always taught 8th grade. Certainly you could see in the Romeo and Juliet, I would consider that a graphic organizer that I had put together so the kids had some type of structure. So I think I don't know. I bet you could probably put some together or even ask your kids. How would you organize this with just some pictures, some stick figures and keywords, and maybe just some framing, and show them there are lots of alternatives to that. I just get worried that sometimes they get cornered by that graphic organizer. So I mean, as a tool, I would think it's appropriate to show, here's what some kids, it's helpful for them to use, but you don't need to use this. I see, and you know fourth graders far better than I do. But I would just hope that that graphic organizer doesn't make them stick with a format that they could write something much more creative and engaging with their own ideas in mind. I mean, I think that should always be an alternative. But have you got a place where you have used graphic organizers that you have felt like they've been helpful or not helpful?
That's the question back to me. I would say that with creating a first career persuasive essay, that's when the organizers have been helpful. But then it seems like there's a major quantum leap between the organizer and then actually forming paragraphs from that. And so maybe it's a more nuanced question specific to a particular unit rather than the 30,000 foot look. That's helpful.
Well,
Thank you.
I also, the other thing that just occurred to me is if at a fourth grade, in the fourth grade, if you've got some, for instance, persuasive essays that have been very helpful using with the kids, if you actually had them turn that essay into a graphic organizer, what might you discover that they see in it? Because I would be willing to bet they're not all the same. So even, I think even turning your question over to the kids and saying, let's look at these 4 to 5 essays and what do you notice? But how is this organized? And see if that might, I think it might surprise you at what I think.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. I don't know how you guys are still awake after all working all day.
I just wanted to make a comment, which is that I just really love how you are grounding this writing work with middle grade students and in something really concrete and tangible. Like by starting with, drawing the floor plan of this place, and then the words associated with that place, or actually like using your hand. What did you physically touch with your hands? I mean, you're really giving them an anchor to build from. And sometimes as students get older, I know I skip that step. Like I go abstract way too quickly, or I like remember injecting some authentic purpose, like as an afterthought, like, oh, I need to do this type of writing. How do I make it authentic? Like to start with something that is really meaningful and concrete. It's just, it seems like, you're really building such a strong foundation for them to build their writing pieces on. So I really appreciated hearing that. I often think I'm more thoughtful about that with younger students, but it's really nice to see some examples of ways you could use it with middle grade students and even, adolescent or even adult
Absolutely.
students.
Yep. Well, I think even what you're saying is that with the quick writes, even those came to be because you were letting kids hold on to a line they borrowed. And when they've got something they can hold on to, they feel a lot more secure in going off in different directions. So yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
I've got a quick one for you, Linda. How about when you go and show kids a piece of a mentor text for a quick write, do you find that, well, I don't know how to ask this. Do you actually give them the text that they can put into their reader's thinker's notebook? Sorry, I called it thinker's notebook, but you call it reading writing.
It's okay.
But do you give them the actual text that they can return to, or do you just project it and then they're writing off of it? I'm just wondering if it would be good if they had it in there.
No, for some kids, it's great if they have it. I always have copies of it. I don't want to make 100 copies that it wasn't really effective for the kids to use and to fill their notebooks up, but they know that I've got copies of it there. So if they want a copy of it, they can have a copy to put in the notebook and write beside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
definitely.
the follow-up question is, if they're doing these quick writes, and I've been using your ideas of quick writes for a while, and I love them so much, and I thank you so much for inspiring me. But if you find kids are often drawing, like every time we quick write, and they're almost always drawing, which is great, but then I get worried that they need to be also writing. You know, have you found little nudges sort of effective, like, you know, captioning, or, you know,
Yeah,
not
exactly.
taking the artwork away, but pushing them in that
Right.
direction?
Yeah, tell me about this. This drawing that you did. Wow, this is really scary looking. Tell me what you're trying to project with this. What's going on here? And then sometimes just writing down some of their words and just handing it to them is a good thing to do. But I think how old are the kids? It doesn't
I
even
currently
matter.
have 8th graders, but I've taught 7th.
Yeah, there are some that hold on to the drawing, like Adam held on to the drawing constantly.
Mhm.
And that's fine. I mean, that kid has become a professional videographer. Or Lincoln Purse. I don't know if you know his Big Nate cartoon book.
Oh.
He went through our school,
Oh,
and he was constantly drawing cartoons. So us dismissing them, I don't think we should do that. It could even be building on making those sketches even better. But certainly, I mean, you do want the kids writing, and I did want them writing too. But if I've got a kid who's just drawing and drawing and drawing, let's make that drawing the best that you can. And there might be some captions that go with it, or tell me something about it. If they're ready to move on, they will. I mean, Lincoln talked a lot about every time, even when he got to high school, he couldn't help himself. He was drawing cartoons on the board in high school classrooms before the teacher came in, and they would get angry with him. Well, they're not angry anymore. This kid is, he's got, I don't know how many books out, but so I think we just have to say, is it really that important? Or when he gets to the high school, are he or she going to be turning that drawing into writing? Yeah, I'm not sure that answers it at all.
No, it definitely does. No, it validates. I think even just, can you add a thought bubble to, what that character might be thinking?
Right.
And there's so many fun ways to incorporate. It doesn't have to be either or. I mean, I think that's really the point here.
Yeah.
There are ways to sort of integrate. Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Linda,
Well, I was just gonna add on, Roger Esley, who was the illustrator I talked about that taught me about drawing is thinking. He has art. He has 5 pieces of art in the Metropolitan Museum in New York. But he said the minute somebody asked him to write you have to write a kind of description that goes with it. He said, I'm going to show them what a failure I am. I cannot portray what I'm thinking in words, but I can in art. So here's an artist with work in the Metropolitan Museum that is petrified to put words down on paper as an adult. So yeah, we all come with different strengths.
Linda, I just want to share in the chat, Marley commented that she has a 9-year-old in the room and heard the Big Nate mentioned, and we got very excited. So
oh, really? Yay.
Small fan in the background.
Yeah, that's great. Oh, how about anybody else? You're probably all exhausted. I have such admiration for all that you've done the whole year. It's phenomenal to me. If you weren't here on Tuesday, I mentioned that my colleagues always keep saying to me, boy, that was a fortuitous decision on your part to leave in June of 2019, and I still feel a little bit of guilt as to what all of you have been through, but I certainly admire that. If we had time, I would play that Make the World Better, but I hope all of you know that those kids really are anxious to come back to school with all of you.
Kim just reminded you if you could just put your email in the chat, Linda, so that
Oh,
you can
yes.
send anyone that's interested that bookmark. Thank you.
Yes, somebody, all right, here's my email.
Linda, I just want to thank you again. I'm on with some colleagues from my school in the district, and Jen, who is a special educator, and we share some students. We were just chatting about your quick writes book and how we're really excited to try it for some writers who are a bit reluctant, and doing the writing along with you has been getting me thinking about how this can be helpful. And in fact, I used it today with a second grade group. We read a book about hurricanes, and I had them draw a picture actually first about how hurricanes form before they wrote, and they were like, why are we doing, they were so surprised that I asked them to do that, but I noticed that it seemed to really help their writing. So
Oh, that's
thank
great.
you so much for all.
Thank you for telling me that. Thank you so much. So if there were particular things that I put up that you would like me to send to you, I would definitely do that if you email me. And just say it was the Vermont Council, and this is particularly what you would be interested in having, if I could get that to you. Well, I'm going to say thank you to everybody. I'm hoping that I can actually come as not a participant, but somebody next year, because I really was looking forward to meeting everybody. So it's been great. You have been a terrific audience. I just can't believe that everything you do have to do is online, but I hope we get through this pretty soon. And thank you for all you do with kids.
Thank you again, Linda, for being here and adjusting to this format for us. We really, really appreciate it. And we would love to have you back anytime in person, even if it's just to join us at one of our conferences.
Yeah, oh, for sure. You're
local enough. So thank you again. And folks, just know you'll get your evaluation form linked in, or evaluation form sent, and the certificate of attendance will be linked in that. If you have any questions about anything, you feel free to reach out to any of us on the board. And we really thank you all for being here and look forward to hopefully seeing everybody in person next year.
Yes.
At Sugar Bush. Yay.
All right. Thank you all, and have a great weekend.
Bye. Carol, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to tell everyone that part of their evaluation, they have an opportunity to suggest speakers. So we would really appreciate those suggestions.
Yeah. Thanks.
2022 at Sugar Bush.
Yeah. Thank you.
And you hopefully will be getting copies of the video.
Yes.
The first video is okay, although there are a strange 5 seconds of me looking at my screen, so I'm trying to get rid of that. And today I'm going to hopefully have Rebecca make sure that you press save recording or whatever, and I'm going to see what happens because I came in late.
Yeah.
So
I've been recording. I will send it to you, Ellen.
Awesome.
And do what you want to do with it.
Good. Hopefully it's your face now looking strangely at your screen.
Hopefully I tried to remember it was being recorded.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Bye all. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. And save the chat too, Rebecca.
So how do I do that, Ellen?
Go into the chat at the bottom. There's a little symbol that says file.
Oh, yeah.
Dots.
Yeah.
Just save it there and it'll go to the same folder that the recording goes to.
Perfect.
Because I only get the chat that I was in on.
Okay. So I just saved that, and when I exit out of here, it'll pop up. It automatically, I know, pops up.
Yeah, it will. And I don't know if it'll pop up on mine too, but we'll just see what happens. And if you get it,
the file that I have, and then
right,
convert it and put it up on YouTube.
Perfect.
Who was sending out the evaluation? Was that coming from you, Ellen? Chrissy?
Yeah.
Well, she was making it, but I think Carol probably, because you've been contacting everybody. Yeah, she doesn't have access to all the emails.
Sure, I can send it out.
But wait, Well, no, I don't wait until you get the video, but because I don't know how fast I'm going to be
Let's
able to
send
do
the
it.
video separate, but I just
Okay.
dawned on me, Chrissy wasn't at either session and I don't know. I mentioned it in my opening and I was like, oh, but I don't know who's coming, that's coming from. So Carol, if you could send that out to the group of participants.
She may have made it in the VCR email account. I'm not sure. I haven't checked for it or anything.
Yeah, the thing was, she was gonna fix it so that you wouldn't get your certificate of attendance until you filled it out. And
Right, that's right.
I needed her help with that piece.
Yeah, I don't
Okay.
know either.
So maybe Carol, reach out to Chrissy.
I
'cause
will.
she's
I'll send her an
pretty quick
email
on the
right away.
return. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
even if Chrissy could send it out, that would be awesome. I'm
And
looking
did we end up just having a lot of people not come?
today. I don't know. I asked Carol.
There were 25,
Right.
and it was 25 yesterday too. But like Carol, that Mary Bove that signed up yesterday or today, she wasn't there.
She didn't check her email, and so she didn't see that I had sent her the link.
I sent it to her too, so I sent it as well.
I forwarded you and Catherine an email that I just got from her right before 5.
Okay.
Oh,
She
I
did
see.
not
Okay.
attend. So we're gonna.
Because I also forwarded your, April 29th, what you sent out to her as well, as soon as I realized that she was there. That's
I
weird.
know. I don't know why she didn't check her email because she really wanted to come.
Yeah, so we need to make sure we got to take that off the spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Carol, I'm in the VCR drive.
Stop the recording. Stop the recording. Because otherwise